So in this final part of the lecture, what I want to do is just give you some examples of two environmental trends that have occurred in recent years and have really had or are having a major impact on how industries actually compete in the sort of modern economic context. So the first trend I'm going to talk about is one that actually crosses over between socio-cultural and technological change, and it's the rise of what we call the sharing economy, or sometimes also referred to as collaborative consumption. So in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, as the internet has become more ubiquitous, as smart devices, televisions, phones, computers have got better at engaging with an online environment, people have started to realise that there's a whole range of opportunities to increasingly do business on a peer-to-peer basis. So rather than using a company, whether it's a retail business to buy your clothes or whether it's a hotel to book your hotel rooms through, you can actually increasingly do business with your fellow citizens. And this is quite a radical departure in terms of the way we as an economy think about business and think about business processes. Traditionally, when we had a need, when we wanted a product to satisfy a particular need, we would go to a business and we would purchase a product that they themselves had manufactured and hope that that product would create value for us as a consumer. In the sharing economy, rather than going to a company, we go to our peers and we contact those peers with the hope that they'll be able to provide us with something that is useful to us as an individual. And again, technology enables this. We're able to now have distributed social networks that operate on a global basis, and we're able to reach to a whole range of people that we never would have had access to previously. So I think, again, if you look at business and you look at the change that the economy is undergoing now and into the future, we're going to see more of this sort of sharing economy, collaborative consumption occurring on a regular basis, and it's occurring across industry sectors. And I've got up here a couple of examples of organisations that are really shaping or reshaping areas in which they compete. Airbnb, for example, has really shaken up the hotel industry. Airbnb has only been around for, I think, about 6 or 7 years, so it's a relatively new concept still. But increasingly what we're finding is that people like the ability to not have to stay in a hotel, but to actually be able to rent an apartment or a house or a room in a house that people might have available when they go on holidays or when they travel for business. Part of the attractiveness of Airbnb is the greatness of choice. There's a lot more choice out there. And the fact that people feel that their money is going to an individual rather than going to a large multinational corporation who makes lots of profits and is probably not necessarily always good for society. So Airbnb is a good example of this sort of sharing or collaborative economy. More and more people are booking accommodation through this network, and also more and more people are able to diversify and make a little money on the side by putting their spare bedrooms or their investment properties onto an Airbnb marketplace. There are some downsides, of course, with things like Airbnb. If you look at what's happening in the rental marketplace in Australia, which is already very tight, there's not a lot of rental property around, more and more people are deciding to put their properties onto Airbnb rather than renting them out to long-term tenants, because they realise they can make more money on a per-night basis than they can from signing an annual contract for someone to rent that property. We've seen the rise of a whole range, and I'm going to use the term dating apps here, although you might say Tinder is more about an app for developing friends with benefits. But there's more and more of these applications now where people can meet people from different places, different backgrounds, and form social bonds with these particular people. Similarly, companies like Airtasker are offering the ability for individuals to pick up short-term periods of work for organisations or individuals. Airtasker is a great service. It's a forum where people who are looking to make additional money and have a certain unique set of skills can actually register their skills. So say, for example, you're really good at doing spreadsheets. You might go onto Airtasker and put up your CV and say, I'm an expert in spreadsheet applications. And so someone might contact you and say, look, I need you to prepare this spreadsheet for a report that I've got to do and present it in this form. And so you trade directly with that individual. They provide that task and the funds are transferred between those two individuals. So air tasking really represents a significant change in the labour market. We're seeing more and more people picking up these short-term contract-based work rather than working permanently for organisations. Similarly, we've seen the rise of things like eBay, and eBay is one of the oldest forms of the sharing economy. eBay is basically an online garage sale. It's a place where individuals who have things that they want to sell can put them up on the market, establish a reputation as a reputable seller, and have people purchase those products, often at a reduced price than what you'd be able to buy through a normal retail outlet. Of course, some retail outlets also do use eBay as a platform, rather than actually doing it all themselves. They say, well, eBay's already there, they've got a customer pool, so why don't we actually sell products there? And you go onto eBay and you can buy a whole range of different products that actually might be useful or satisfy your needs. We're seeing the sharing economy also impact on the car industry. The traditional model in the car industry has been that people have purchased cars which they own and then drive for a period of time, and then they maybe sell them on to other people at the end of their satisfied period with that particular product. With something like Zipcar, we see a different model of car, in inverted commas, ownership. So rather than actually owning a car, you subscribe to the Zipcar system. You get a swipe card, a pass, and if you need to use a car for a period of time, you can go to a number of designated spots around major cities, find a Zipcar, which you can of course look up on your mobile phone to see where the nearest is, and that card will give you access to that car, and you can actually drive and use that car for a period of time. So it's a form of almost like a car leasing system. Zipcar does represent, again, a change to the way we think about ownership. If you look in America, particularly in California, a lot of new housing developers now are required to actually have designated parking spaces for car sharing services so that people don't have to own cars and they don't have to build infrastructure for everyone owning their own car. And we're also seeing this sharing economy coming into what will be traditionally referred to as the finance sector or the banking and finance sector, with companies like GoFundMe and Kickstarter. So GoFundMe is a portal where you as an individual can go and get other people to provide you with money to help you fund things that you need to do. And look, people go there for a whole range of different reasons. People might need a medical procedure that they can't afford, so they go up onto GoFundMe. They say, look, I'm looking for someone to support me to get this surgical procedure. People might donate $5, but what you do is you get 1,000 people donating $5, and all of a sudden you've got a big pot of money that you can use to actually fund an activity. So again, it's peer-to-peer. Rather than going to a bank who is going to be more reluctant to lend money for these sorts of purposes, you can find lots of individuals who are willing to support you. And then you can also go, if you're thinking about starting a business, then you can look at going to something like Kickstarter. Again, what we know after the global financial crisis is that a lot of banking and financial institutions are reluctant to lend money to business startups. Kickstarter, on the other hand, is a way where you, if you've got an idea, can go on to Kickstarter and again get people to crowdfund what it is that you're actually doing. So crowdfunding is the name that we give to this new form of finance. So again, you can see how the rise of this willingness of people to engage in the sharing economy, whether as a customer or as a seller, has created a whole new market segment. And these segments are actually the segments of the economy that are growing the most rapidly. Another major external environmental factor I think that we all need to be mindful of is demographic change. There's a saying that's often used is that demography is death. As much as we might try, we can't undo or change significantly the demographic profile of a country in which we compete or operate. And so demographics are a major issue that we all need to consider. And one of the things we notice if we look at the demographic profile of the world is that we're living in an era where in some parts of the world, certainly in the developed economies, so countries like Australia, United States, much of Europe, even to a degree places like China, certainly Japan, we see that the population is rapidly ageing. Ageing is being caused by the fact that people are living much longer. You know, we have much better healthcare today than we did a generation ago, and so people are able to live for a greater length of time than they would have previously been able to. And so certainly that extended age as contributing to this ageing profile. The other thing is that in developed countries, what we're seeing is that people are having fewer children. So the average family size is getting smaller. And so that again has a big impact in terms of raising the overall age of the population. So if you think about a country like Australia, we find that we have a fertility rate that sits around somewhere like 1.9, so 1.9 children for every woman, which is actually below the rate that you need to sustain population growth. In Europe, that rate's down to about 1.5. You compare that with somewhere like Africa, and what you'll see in Africa is that a lot of African countries, the fertility rate is upwards of 5 live births per adult female. And so we see a much younger age profile in some of these developing economies. Again, if you think about somewhere like India, the average age of India is early 20s, early to mid 20s, whereas in Australia it's late 30s to early 40s. So there's a number of demographic changes that we as business people need to be aware of. The consumer profile that we're going to face in markets like Australia and America are increasingly going to diverge and differ quite significantly from the types of consumer markets that we'll see in India or Africa or parts of South America. And so we need to be mindful of these differences, and we need to think about adapting our product profile to target those particular markets and those unique market characteristics. So again, that's just an example of a couple of trends that are impacting on business. When you go and do your case analysis, so when you're looking at Amazon and the launch of the Kindle Fire, you need to start thinking about some of these other macro environmental forces that may be of relevance to that organisation and may well impact on their overall performance. So that brings to an end this lecture on the first part of external analysis, which is looking at the general or macro environment. In lecture 3 next week, I'm going to talk about the industry and competitor analysis component of that external analysis. If you do have any questions about any of these factors, so things like demographic change, the sharing economy, or any of the topic that we've looked at in this lecture, please feel free to contact me or to talk to your tutor. Apart from that, I wish you all the best for the rest of this week, and I'll talk to you again next week. Bye for now.